I remember that morning too well. It was one of those mornings that tries hard to feel normal. The kind where the sun's out but doesn't seem to touch you. I was up at 6, just like always. Made coffee, dark roast, 2 sugars, his cup next to mine out of habit. The dog sat near the door, waiting for a walk that wouldn't come. I noticed the silence first. No footsteps upstairs. No soft humming from the bathroom. No sarcastic, "Coffee's not gonna drink itself, babe," from behind me. He was gone. That wasn't new. He left early sometimes. But he always left a note. A text. A post-it on the fridge. Something. That morning, nothing. Just a plain white envelope on the kitchen table. No decoration, just my name written in his all-caps handwriting. I thought maybe it was something sweet. Maybe a surprise he'd planned. A dinner reservation? An apology for forgetting our anniversary last month? No. The first line hit me like a freight train. "I'm sorry, but I've filed for divorce." My body didn't react right away. I stood there, the letter trembling in my hands, staring at those words like they'd rearranged themselves. My mouth went dry. My coffee had gone cold. Is this how 15 years ends? A note next to stale toast? I whispered. The only answer was the clock ticking above the microwave. I called him. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. Then again. Nothing. I sat down, stared at the floor. My phone buzzed, a message from the bank. Your joint account balance is now $0. That snapped me out of it. I opened my laptop, logged into every account we shared. All of them empty. Savings, checking, even the vacation fund we started last year for a trip that would never happen. My own savings account, barely enough for groceries, let alone rent. I called HR at work, pretending to be calm. "Hi, I just noticed my paycheck didn't hit my account. Has there been an issue?" No, it was deposited to the account on file. It was updated last week. I didn't even know what to say. He changed my direct deposit. I called my sister. She picked up on the first ring. "He didn't just leave, Madeline," she said, her voice sharp. "He erased you." I stood up, walked around the house like a ghost. Something inside me refused to believe this was happening. But the evidence was everywhere. His guitar, gone. His running shoes. A couple of drawers in the dresser, empty. Even the photo frames, we had this one from our first trip to Arizona. It was always on the mantle. Not anymore. I thought back to our last real argument. He said, "I just need space to think." I nodded then, thinking it meant he'd go for a walk. Maybe stay at a friend's place for a night or two. I didn't know that space meant escape. I opened the trash under the sink, almost automatically. That's where I found them, 2 receipts. One from a storage unit across town. The other from a wire transfer. A big one. I sat down again. My face was hot, my hands ice cold. Was I blind, or just too hopeful? The phone rang. A new number. I answered. "Mrs. Hayes?" "This is Rachel Martin, legal counsel for David Hayes. I'm calling to inform you that Mr. Hayes has filed an emergency order to freeze all marital assets. You will be receiving a formal notice shortly. Per the order, we advise no direct contact with Mr. Hayes. All communication should be through legal counsel moving forward." I let out a bitter laugh. He took everything and left me a therapist's note and a court date. Excuse me? Nothing. After I hung up, I stared at my reflection in the microwave. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood there, thinking. I knew where he worked. And I knew one thing: if he wouldn't talk to me like a man, I'd look him in the eye like a woman who deserved better. That afternoon, I changed the locks. Petty? Maybe. But it was the only door I still controlled. Then I drove down to the plasma donation center. He used to go there when we were tight on money, back in the early days. I didn't know why I thought to check, but I did. The nurse at the desk looked surprised when I gave his name. He's not here today, but he's been in a lot. Last time he came in, he passed out. Looked awful. Like he hadn't eaten in days. Something twisted in my gut. Did he say anything? Anything strange? She hesitated. Nurses aren't supposed to talk. But something in her expression softened. I probably shouldn't tell you this, but he said he had to get the money in by Monday. Or he'd lose everything. And someone else would pay the price. I thanked her and walked out into the parking lot. The air felt thicker. He wasn't just running. He was hiding. And he wasn't alone in whatever mess he'd made. Who else? I kept whispering to myself as I drove back from the clinic. Those two words bounced around in my skull like marbles in a glass jar. The nurse's voice still rang in my ears: someone else would pay the price. Who else? And why Monday? I pulled into the driveway, engine still running, and sat there staring into the dashboard. Then I remembered the receipt. The one I'd found in the trash behind the sink, storage unit, downtown Indy. I grabbed my bag, shuffled through my notes, and found the crumpled slip. It wasn't far. About 30 minutes, maybe less with traffic light. I drove there before I could talk myself out of it. The place was quiet, tucked behind a row of cheap warehouses. I gave the clerk Orson's name. She barely looked up, just slid me a clipboard. Unit 14B. Inside, it smelled like dust and secrets. Cardboard boxes stacked neatly. Some labeled with names I'd never heard before. One said Gavin M. Another said F. Logan Contracts. Business cards were rubber-banded in clusters, none of them with Orson's real name. At the bottom of one box, I found a small, tarnished key with a yellow tag that read 5B Calhoun. Downtown address. I didn't even have to ask. What did you need a second apartment for, Orson? I whispered, holding the key like it might bite me. The next morning, I parked a block away from the Calhoun building. Clean, upscale. Not his style. Not our style. I walked in like I belonged. The doorman looked up. Visiting? I smiled. His sister. Just grabbing some stuff. Elevator up to the 5th floor. The key worked without hesitation. Inside, spotless. Modern furniture, soft grays and dark blues. No clutter. It felt like someone else's life. Someone younger. Richer. Detached. I walked slowly through the space. A set of dumbbells. A MacBook on the desk. On the fridge, a photo that stopped me cold. Orson, with his arm around a woman. Blonde. About my age. Laughing. Comfortable. Intimate. I reached for the counter, suddenly dizzy. A folder sat near the sink. Lease agreement. His name wasn't on it. But the signature? I'd know that handwriting anywhere. His alias. The one he used years ago for a side hustle he promised he shut down. Calendar pinned to the wall, meet F. Transfer, last chance. Confirm Monday. I stared at it, each word a new bruise. It's not betrayal that breaks you, I muttered. It's the discovery that there was never loyalty to begin with. The door opened behind me. I spun around. The woman from the photo. She froze. Who are you? Madeline. Orson's wife. She turned white. I thought. I mean, he told me you were out of the picture. That it was over years ago. That you were. She didn't finish. I didn't need her to. I'm Fiona, she said finally. We've been working on a new life plan. Orson's been trying to close old chapters. Liquidate past obligations. My voice was steady. Past obligations? That's what he called 15 years and a mortgage? She looked confused. Defensive. He didn't tell me about any of this. I swear. I thought he said he was divorced. Do you know how many people he's told that to? I stepped closer. I think you and I were both lied to. The difference is, I married him. She didn't answer. Just stood there, arms crossed over herself, trying to hold together a world that was starting to crack. I left without another word. Back home, I didn't sit down. I didn't cry. I pulled out my old contacts list and called Marcus, a PA I'd helped years ago when I was working in legal support. You still take clients who bring in disasters? I asked. He laughed. Only the really juicy ones. I've got aliases. An apartment address. A woman who thinks she's his future. I need it all tracked. I gave him everything, Fiona's name, the lease, the calendar. Within hours, he called back. Your guy's running 2 identities. One lists him as a self-employed investor. He's got financial activity tied to a private lender. Big money. If he doesn't pay by Monday, they pull the plug. On what? Not sure. But looks like he's hiding assets under that woman's name. I hung up and sat in silence. He didn't leave me because I was weak, I thought. He left because I knew too much to keep quiet. That night, I was making tea when the email came through. No subject line. Just a familiar address. Our old shared email, the one we used for family photos and Amazon deliveries. I opened it. Final chance before they pull the plug. Don't tell anyone. Especially her. I read it again. Then again. Especially her. That was your last mistake, Orson. I got the call mid-afternoon, Orson's brother's birthday dinner. Just dinner, family, Selah. Let's show we're civil. The word sat weird on my phone. Civil, after everything. I stared at the ceiling of my living room, light slipping through the blinds, and felt the old quiet panic creep. What's the catch? I changed into something simple but sharp, navy blouse, black slacks. Nothing flashy, but not invisible either. My friend's advice echoed, if they bait you, smile like you know a secret. I nodded at the mirror, set my jaw, grabbed my purse. The steakhouse was downtown Indianapolis, tucked behind a strip of hotels. The private room felt too perfect, wood paneling, low lights, white tablecloths. Every angle shouted polished exterior masking something. Orson walked in late, arm around Fiona. She didn't bother to introduce herself to me. She slid into the chair opposite mine, smiling. He offered barely a glance my way. The room's mood shifted when his sister casually asked, loud enough for me to hear, "So, Selah, any plans since the divorce?" I froze mid-forkful of salad. The glass eased from my hand. 2 years of our life, dinner, memories, it felt like a microscope. Fiona raised her wine glass. "Here's to cutting out the past so we can build a future." The toasts rang in hollow laughter that traveled right through me. I sat up straighter. I waited. And when it was my turn, I said only, "Congratulations. I hope it's everything you expected." Silence. The room swallowed me. He shifted uneasily. She looked stunned, off balance. The camera of attention turned. I leaned forward. "You see this ring?" I tapped my wedding band. 15 years. I didn't take it off for show. Ask yourself, why am I still wearing it? The table momentarily held its breath. I whispered to him directly, "You may toast to your future, but remember, karma doesn't RSVP. It just shows up." No shouting. No tears. Just quiet truth in the room. After dessert, at the glass doors of the restaurant's valet, he caught me. Envelope in hand. "Before you play hero," he said, tone low, threatening. I reached for the door. He handed me the envelope. "Read this. Then decide if you want to continue digging." Inside, a draft restraining order. Accusations. A narrative built to destroy. He leaned closer. "Stop stirring the pot, or I will. And you'll regret it." I didn't flinch. Cold night air rolled in, lightning flickered in the distance. I pocketed the envelope. Met his eyes and said, "You'll need a new tactic. I don't scare like I used to." He flinched. Back at home, phone buzzed just after midnight. Screenshot on the screen, $12,000 wire to Fiona's offshore account. Note attached, "You don't know the half of it. Meet me tomorrow." I held the phone in the dark, heart pounding, not fear, but clarity. The morning after the dinner felt heavier than any hangover I'd ever known. I woke up with the weight of too many words still echoing in my head, the laughter, the toast, the sound of my name being used like a punchline. The sun broke through the blinds, but it didn't bring light with it. Just exposure. I made coffee but didn't drink it. I just stood there watching it steam, hands flat on the counter. What if I just stopped fighting? The question slipped out before I could stop it. Maybe if I dropped the divorce, stopped digging, stopped caring, maybe I could breathe again. I opened my laptop, started typing an email to Orson's lawyer. Something about settling quietly, about ending this without bloodshed. I stared at the blinking cursor. Then I saved it as a draft and closed the lid. "Maybe silence is safer than justice when you're the only one bleeding for it," I whispered. Around noon, I drove to the small church 2 blocks away. I wasn't there to pray. I didn't even know what I believed anymore. But the stillness felt like medicine. I sat in the back pew, staring at the flicker of candles up front, and let the quiet swallow the noise inside me. No words. No plans. Just breathing. When I left, I wasn't sure what decision I'd made, only that I couldn't keep living on pure fury. I needed distance, from him, from everything. That evening, I was folding laundry when someone knocked at the door. The sound startled me. No one visits unannounced anymore. I opened it a few inches. A man stood there, mid-40s, polite but uneasy. "Mrs. Hayes?" Yes? My name's Henry. I used to work for Orson. At his consulting firm. I hesitated, studying him. That company doesn't exist anymore. He nodded. Exactly. That's why I'm here. I let him in. We sat at the kitchen table, same one where I'd once eaten Sunday breakfasts with Orson. Henry placed a folder down and slid it toward me. He had us signing papers that didn't make sense, shell accounts, fake clients. When I refused, he let me go. No severance. No reference. Just silence. He opened the folder. Copies of documents, wire transfers, invoices with Fiona's name typed neatly at the bottom. He's been laundering investor money, Henry said quietly. And using her to do it. But here's the part you should know, he's got contingency plans. If he goes down, someone else takes the blame. He's betting on you or her. The room felt smaller. So I'm not just the wife he left behind, I said slowly. I'm a liability in his escape plan. Henry nodded once, regret in his eyes. He's not just running from you. He's building his own cover story. When he left, I sat alone again, folder open like a wound. Later, I turned on the small burner phone Henry had left. The screen lit up, showing photos of receipts, cash withdrawals, travel tickets. Then I opened a note file. It was titled, If She Talks. Inside were bullet points. My old therapy notes. My prescriptions from years ago. Details only someone who'd gone through my drawers would know. He'd been preparing this for months, painting me as unstable, ready to crumble. My chest tightened, but then something inside me steadied. I deleted the email draft to his lawyer. They say when someone shows you who they are, believe them, I said aloud. I just never thought he'd show me this version. That night, I spread everything across the dining table, receipts, emails, names, dates. I organized them into folders, color-coded by connection. For the first time, my silence didn't feel like surrender, it felt like strategy. I called an old friend, Laura, who now worked in local media. I might need a favor soon, I told her. If things start looking messy, I want you to have the full story. She didn't ask questions. Just said, you got it. Before bed, I wrote a short note for myself, tucked it into a folder labeled Final Moves. A safety net, just in case. Then I whispered into the quiet, this time, when I move, it'll be for the checkmate, not the counter. It was past midnight when I went back through the phone one last time. I played one of the audio memos. Orson's voice filled the room. Fiona's getting cold feet, he said, sounding tense. If Amelia finds out. The recording cut off. I froze. Amelia. That was my sister's name. It was just past 11:30 p.m. The house was silent except for the low hum of the refrigerator. I sat alone at my desk, dim light washing over stacks of paper and a burner phone that had become my unwelcome companion. I thought I'd seen all it had to offer. I was wrong. There was one folder I hadn't noticed before, tucked inside the phone's local storage, buried 3 folders deep. It was called Legacy, Emerald Comb. I froze. The name alone stopped my breath. I tapped it open. There was just one file, a scanned image of the emerald comb my father had given me before he passed. On the edge of the image, written in his handwriting so small you'd miss it if you blinked, for the one who builds when shown the door. I sat back, stunned. I'd seen that same symbol, etched in the corner of our earliest business ledgers, when Orson and I first started out. A curving S through a broken ring. I always thought it was a decorative flourish, something Dad doodled when helping with the books. But now I knew. It wasn't art. It was a cipher. Dad didn't just leave me a comb, I murmured. He left me a map. Something shifted inside me then. No more retreat. No more hoping Orson would hang himself with his own lies. If silence was power, it was mine to wield now. I hadn't even closed the file when my phone buzzed. A text, short and jarring, "I'll be there 707 tomorrow, Elias." The next morning, just after 7, I met Elias in a small rented conference room downtown, same place I'd used for depositions years back. He walked in without a coat, face sharp with resolve I hadn't seen since he was a teenager. He sat down, placed his phone on the table, and said, "I'm tired of pretending he's not the man he really is." He pulled up emails from Orson. Promises of hush money. Bribes, veiled as offers. All dated weeks before our separation went public. He offered me money to stay quiet, Elias said, jaw tight. To ignore what he did. What he's doing to you. But I can't anymore. If you go down alone, I go down too. I pick one, you. The words landed like an anchor in my chest. I wanted to hug him. Instead, I nodded. Thank you. That day, for the first time in a long while, I felt like I wasn't standing in the shadows anymore. We got to work. Side by side, we mapped out everything, dates, shell accounts, aliases. The comb symbol kept showing up, linked to line items I had once written off as clerical errors. They weren't. They were calculated diversions. I contacted Rowena with a coded message. She was slippery, loyal to money, but she had her own cracks. I typed, "I know you're listening. Protect your legacy or mine will tell the world." Elias leaned back in his chair after we ran through the timeline. So now what? Now? I said, staring at the board. Now we wait. If Orson makes the first move, we go public. But we stay ahead. Always. I whispered something then, mostly to myself. Silent resilience is only useful until someone else defines your silence for you. 3 days later, I walked into the executive meeting of the company Orson and I once built. I wasn't on the guest list. That didn't matter. The room went still when I entered. Bram Weatherby, the new CEO, stood up. Selah? We didn't expect to see you today. Good, I said, setting a thick binder on the table. Surprises keep meetings honest. Orson looked up from his seat, face unreadable. I opened the binder. Inside, the comb symbol. Dated invoices. Screenshots from the burner phone. Orson barely got a word out before Elias stood beside me. I have emails, he said to the board, from Orson. He tried to pay me off. I'm not for sale. You could hear the air leave the room. Bram sat down. Orson tried to speak, but it came out dry. This is a personal vendetta. No, I said. It's a professional reckoning. I looked around the table. You built your empire on deception. I built my future on integrity. Which will outlast the other? No one answered. They didn't have to. The meeting ended in silence. Bram stared at me like he'd just seen the cracks in his own foundation. Orson didn't look at me once. He just sat there, quiet, hands folded like a man waiting on a sentence he didn't want to hear. That night, I came home late. The porch light flickered. There was a small wooden box on my steps. No name. No note. I opened it inside. The emerald comb was inside, the real one, mine. Alongside it, a USB drive labeled, "Tell the truth or I will." I plugged it in. The screen flashed with my name. Then a countdown. 72 hours until release. He thinks he controls the clock. I think I'll change the timesheet. At 11:07 a.m., I got the email. Just one line in the body: your presence requested at 2 p.m. today, Board Chambers, Meridian Tower. No greeting. No context. Just a summons. I didn't flinch. But my body betrayed me, palms damp, jaw tight. I stood by the window, watching the autumn light stretch across my lawn, trying to summon that steel I'd leaned on so many times before. "Walk in like you built the place," I whispered to myself. Because once, I had. We started that company in a garage, with bad coffee and better ideas. I sketched the logo on a napkin while Orson paced around ranting about market gaps. It wasn't just work, it was memory. My fingerprints were on every inch of that business. And now they wanted to pretend I never existed? By 1:45, I was standing in front of Meridian Tower. Security didn't recognize me. They asked for my badge. I held up the guest pass. That was the first crack in the facade. The second came when I walked into the boardroom. Orson sat at the head, cool and poised, like he hadn't just weaponized everything I'd helped him build. Fiona was seated to his right, her expression unreadable. Monty, my friend of 20 years, sat in the back row. He couldn't meet my eyes. The chairman cleared his throat and began. Due to recent allegations and concerns regarding financial instability, the board has voted. I didn't hear the rest right away. My ears buzzed. My throat tightened. Effective immediately, Selah Grimsley is removed from any operational role within this company. There it was. I stood up. My voice didn't shake. On what basis? I'm one of the founders. You don't rewrite the first page just because you don't like where the chapter's going. Monty raised his hand. I second the motion. Flat. Emotionless. Like he hadn't been in my home last Thanksgiving, laughing with my kids. They put graphs on the screen, colored charts, numbers out of context. Unauthorized expenditures. Risk exposure. The same tricks we used on competitors. Now aimed at me. I stared down at my binder. The one with the comb symbol, the invoices, the burner phone records. None of it mattered now. They weren't interested in truth, they were building a wall, and I was the first brick to be removed. I looked at each of them. You're revoking my title. That's fine. But don't kid yourselves, you can't erase the work I did. You can't scrub me out of your origin story. I turned to leave. The lock clicked behind me. They locked the door. Not with force, but with finality. I wasn't just out, I was erased. Outside the chamber, the hallway stretched out cold and empty. Monty followed. He moved like his spine had collapsed in on itself. I didn't want it this way, he said, eyes still avoiding mine. But I signed the papers. Why? They gave me a choice. Loyalty to the company or lose everything. I've got 2 kids, Selah. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. He handed me a USB. It's all on there. They froze you out a long time ago. I didn't know how far it went. Until now. He walked away. I stood alone in the corridor, behind me the sound of muffled laughter from people who once called me partner. Betrayal isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just a door quietly clicking shut. I made it to my car. Just sat there, engine off, eyes on the building. Everything in me said drive away. Let it burn. But I didn't. Instead, I plugged in the USB. Forensic data, timestamps, offshore wires. All tied to the same comb symbol my father had used. Layers deeper than even I had seen. I texted Elias, they kicked me out early. We moved tonight. Then I flipped my laptop open. Hit record. I stared into the lens. You removed my name off the door. But I remained the voice behind it. I spoke for 10 minutes. Calm. Clear. Names, dates, truth. I saved the file, zipped the folder, and made peace with the next 48 hours. This wasn't panic. This was strategy. Then, the rearview mirror lit up red and blue. No sirens. Just flashing lights behind me. Before I could think, the phone rang. Rowena. Her voice was short, clipped. He's filed against you. They're on their way. I shut the laptop. Saved everything offline. Hands trembling but steady. The knock came on my window. And for a moment, the whole world held its breath. The TV studio was colder than I expected, but maybe it was just the nerves. Not fear, just the weight of knowing there's no turning back once the lights come on. I was supposed to sit for a quiet pre-recorded segment. That's what they told me. But the moment I stepped in, the producer's voice tightened around me like a wire. It's been bumped to prime time. You go on in 20. He handed me a USB drive. This aired leak just hit every major affiliate. You'll want to see it. I slid the drive into the laptop on the desk and hit play. The video wasn't just proof. It was a damn time capsule. There I was, signing the founding charter, Orson's voice clear in the background, with Sella's leadership, this venture begins. I hadn't seen that footage in years. It was supposed to be archived. Lost in some media vault. But someone had pulled it and handed me the one weapon they never thought I'd reload. We're live in 5, the producer called. I sat up straight. They tried to make me a footnote, I whispered to myself. Now I'm the headline. The red light blinked on. 3 blocks away, Orson's phone was vibrating off the table. I knew because Rowena was feeding me updates from the inside. The boardroom scrambled. Emails flooded. The PR team pulled up an emergency slide deck labeled Crisis Response. Too late. While the media played the clip on loop, I walked through those tall corporate doors again, Elias beside me. I carried the USB in my coat pocket, not as proof for them, but as closure for me. The boardroom quieted the second I entered. Bram stood up. Fiona looked away. Orson's mouth opened, but the chairman lifted his hand. You've lost your floor, Mr. Braithwaite. I stepped forward, calm as Sunday morning. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here for recognition. I built this company. My name was written in the foundation. You buried it. The world just saw it resurrected. Silence. And if you think this ends with a press release or a backroom apology, you're not listening. I looked directly at Orson. Checkmate. I didn't wait for their permission. I turned and left, glass doors catching the flicker of cameras outside. The building I'd built was behind me now, but it no longer owned me. I went straight to the executive suite. The receptionist barely blinked when I handed her a sealed envelope. Please deliver this to Mr. Braithwaite's office. Inside it, final settlement terms, asset reassignments, public acknowledgement clauses. And a closing line written in my father's ink pen, "This is the last check you'll cash in my name." I saw Orson watching from behind the glass wall. His expression didn't show defeat, it showed realization. He knew. I didn't wait for applause. Didn't need confrontation. I just walked. By morning, the headlines were everywhere. Founder reclaims legacy. Corporate coup dismantled. News anchors called me the comeback of the year. I turned off the TV after 2 segments. I needed quiet. I walked through a small park I hadn't visited in years. Let the air settle around me. I remembered my father's words, "Your legacy isn't in what you build. It's in what you survive." He was right. I wasn't after a trophy. I wasn't even after justice anymore. I wanted peace. Restoration. My kids' names cleared. My name remembered for what it truly was. This wasn't closure. It was continuation. I didn't fight for a story that ends. I fought for the one I'll keep telling. That night, back at home, I began packing up files I no longer needed. Folded the statement clothes I wouldn't wear again. Let it all breathe. Then my phone buzzed. No caller ID. You did good. But you're only halfway there. Wait for tomorrow. No name. Just that. I looked across the room at my desk. The emerald comb sat on its side, the engraving still sharp under the light. Someone else had a piece of this puzzle. And I was ready for their next move. 3 weeks after that last boardroom firestorm, I found myself back at the same small community center I used to clean floors in before I ever had a business card with my name on it. The linoleum tiles hadn't changed. Neither had the smell of instant coffee and worn-out paperbacks in the corner shelf. But I had. The moment I walked in, the women I used to volunteer with years ago welcomed me with arms wide open. They hugged tight, like I'd survived something they understood in their bones. "We always knew you'd come back sharper," one of them laughed, handing me a chipped mug of tea. That day, we didn't just catch up. We began sketching something new. A weekly workshop focused on financial clarity, emotional recovery, legal basics. Not lectures, just shared tools. For women over 50 who'd been left behind, overlooked, or underestimated. I looked around the room, same folding chairs, same light hum of the heater. And I thought, maybe this isn't about taking power back. Maybe it's about handing it out, better than it was handed to me. Because I remembered too clearly what it felt like to sell plasma for rent money, to rehearse court statements in my head while cleaning a stranger's bathroom. And now? I was pouring into others instead of leaking out from my own wounds. One afternoon, I stayed late after the workshop, rearranging tables. That's when Elias walked in. Still in his blazer, but no briefcase. No tie. Just him. He held up a brown paper bag. Figured we could use real coffee. I grinned. "You're 2 years late with that." We sat in the kitchen space, plastic chairs squeaking. He told me he'd turned down a new C-suite job. Not doing the game again, he said. Thinking of starting a consultancy. Inspired by a hell of a founder I met once. I laughed, but we both knew that wasn't just a line. He pulled out a photo. Printed. Not digital. A shot of the two of us standing outside that donation center, months ago. I hadn't even known someone took it. "I keep it on my desk," he said. "Reminds me where this started. Who I showed up for." I looked at the picture. Looked at him. Thank you, I said quietly. Not just for picking my side, but for seeing me when I stopped seeing myself. He nodded. Then left without fanfare. That night, I pulled out a letter I'd written weeks earlier. Never sent. Addressed to Orson. I sat alone in the center and read it out loud to no one, just to get the words outside of me. It wasn't angry. It wasn't dramatic. It was closure. I said I remembered when we were in love. That I understood ambition makes people do desperate things. But I also said this, you taught me to fight dirty. But I taught myself to walk clean. When I was done, I folded it once and burned it in the center's old metal ashtray. No applause. Just a few women in the back clapping softly, like it was church and I'd just let something holy go. A week later, I got an invitation to speak at a national women's summit. I nearly turned it down. But something in me said, tell it all. On stage, I told the room I once believed resilience meant surviving. Now I believe it means building something they couldn't burn down. There was applause, sure. But what hit me were the older women in the back row, nodding slowly, eyes wet, not because they pitied me, but because they recognized the road. Someone asked, would you do it all again? I paused. Not for him. Not for the fight. But maybe, just maybe, for her. The woman I became. When I stepped down, I didn't feel like a survivor. I felt like a leader. Later that evening, at home, I sat by the window with a mug of tea. Autumn had fully arrived. Leaves in gold and rust drifted down like soft punctuation marks at the end of a sentence. Then my phone buzzed. It was a text from my daughter. Proud of you, Mom. I watched everything. I sat still. Let those words wash through me. She'd been watching. Not just the fight, but the becoming. They tried to write me off, I said quietly. I rewrote the ending. As I stood to clean up, a soft knock came at the door. No one there. Just an envelope. On the front, Legacy. Part 2. And just like that, the next page waited. 3 weeks after that last boardroom firestorm, I found myself back at the same small community center I used to clean floors in before I ever had a business card with my name on it. The linoleum tiles hadn't changed. Neither had the smell of instant coffee and worn-out paperbacks in the corner shelf. But I had. The moment I walked in, the women I used to volunteer with years ago welcomed me with arms wide open. They hugged tight, like I'd survived something they understood in their bones. We always knew you'd come back sharper, one of them laughed, handing me a chipped mug of tea. That day, we didn't just catch up. We began sketching something new. A weekly workshop focused on financial clarity, emotional recovery, legal basics. Not lectures, just shared tools. For women over 50 who'd been left behind, overlooked, or underestimated. I looked around the room, same folding chairs, same light hum of the heater. And I thought, maybe this isn't about taking power back. Maybe it's about handing it out, better than it was handed to me. Because I remembered too clearly what it felt like to sell plasma for rent money, to rehearse court statements in my head while cleaning a stranger's bathroom. And now? I was pouring into others instead of leaking out from my own wounds. One afternoon, I stayed late after the workshop, rearranging tables. That's when Elias walked in. Still in his blazer, but no briefcase. No tie. Just him. He held up a brown paper bag. Figured we could use real coffee. I grinned. You're 2 years late with that. We sat in the kitchen space, plastic chairs squeaking. He told me he'd turned down a new C-suite job. Not doing the game again, he said. Thinking of starting a consultancy. Inspired by a hell of a founder I met once. I laughed, but we both knew that wasn't just a line. He pulled out a photo. Printed. Not digital. A shot of the two of us standing outside that donation center, months ago. I hadn't even known someone took it. I keep it on my desk, he said. Reminds me where this started. Who I showed up for. I looked at the picture. Looked at him. Thank you, I said quietly. Not just for picking my side, but for seeing me when I stopped seeing myself. He nodded. Then left without fanfare. That night, I pulled out a letter I'd written weeks earlier. Never sent. Addressed to Orson. I sat alone in the center and read it out loud to no one, just to get the words outside of me. It wasn't angry. It wasn't dramatic. It was closure. I said I remembered when we were in love. That I understood ambition makes people do desperate things. But I also said this, you taught me to fight dirty. But I taught myself to walk clean. When I was done, I folded it once and burned it in the center's old metal ashtray. No applause. Just a few women in the back clapping softly, like it was church and I'd just let something holy go. A week later, I got an invitation to speak at a national women's summit. I nearly turned it down. But something in me said, tell it all. On stage, I told the room I once believed resilience meant surviving. Now I believe it means building something they couldn't burn down. There was applause, sure. But what hit me were the older women in the back row, nodding slowly, eyes wet, not because they pitied me, but because they recognized the road. Someone asked, would you do it all again? I paused. Not for him. Not for the fight. But maybe, just maybe, for her. The woman I became. When I stepped down, I didn't feel like a survivor. I felt like a leader. Later that evening, at home, I sat by the window with a mug of tea. Autumn had fully arrived. Leaves in gold and rust drifted down like soft punctuation marks at the end of a sentence. Then my phone buzzed. It was a text from my daughter. Proud of you, Mom. I watched everything. I sat still. Let those words wash through me. She'd been watching. Not just the fight, but the becoming. They tried to write me off, I said quietly. I rewrote the ending. As I stood to clean up, a soft knock came at the door. No one there. Just an envelope. On the front, Legacy. Part 2. And just like that, the next page waited.